Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in. This is Creators on Brand, episode 7, I believe. I'm joined here by Emily Byrne, who's the owner of Centered Creative, an agency that helps small businesses with brand strategy, brand design, and web design. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course. So today we're talking all about building an authentic brand in 2023. If you have any questions throughout or anything you want to add, feel free to add them, put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as best as we can. So I know a little bit about, Centered Creative, and I know I saw you had like a merch shop and downloads and things like that. So what got you into brand strategy and then all these different directions?
Yeah, so I got started in brand strategy in the wine world, actually. So I studied art in school, art and philosophy, and was pretty convinced that I was never going to get a job. And so I drove out to Napa Valley and worked as a harvest intern for 3 to 4 months. And through that process, just absolutely fell in love with Northern California. I'm originally from the East Coast and decided to stay. And so I got a job in marketing for a boutique wine brand. And that kind of evolved into me a very large corporate winding, small boutique luxury brands. And so I got a big taste of what strategy for smaller brands looks like on a more corporate level. And I really, really enjoyed it. But when you're working on at such a big company, you work with a lot of different people and you don't get to have your hands on everything the way that I kind of like to. And so I was really missing doing kind of that creative piece. And so it's been a little over a year, I started my own company, Centered Creative. And so now I get to do both the design and the strategy for mid to small businesses. So it's been a really nice combo.
That's really cool. So like before, like you were saying, it was mostly when you were working under an agency, you were mostly doing strategy stuff, right?
Yeah, it was strategy. And then I was managing other people doing
Right.
the creative side of things.
So do you enjoy, is that the kind of the side you missed? Is that kind of creative design side that you want to get back into?
Yeah, exactly. And I honestly just found myself doing other people's work for them,
Yeah.
because I missed it and I like knew the Adobe suite and things like that.
Right.
And so, which was fun, but also like didn't get me into like trouble. I don't know what like the right word is for it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
So yeah, because I know now that your whole message is like the whole authenticity piece. So like helping businesses kind of, form with this, by conveying authenticity. And what does that mean to you really? And where did that come from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think working in the more corporate culture and working for such small brands, I found that through the many hands that are involved in a more corporate structure, the kind of why and the story behind the brands really lost its purpose. It lost its power. It lost what I like to call its life force.
Right.
And so I felt like um, I just feel like when you get so far removed from the why of the product, or the service you're offering, the quality of that product or service significantly decreases. And I found that with the wine that I was selling, I was a little bit less proud of it, even though it was sometimes like an $800 bottle.
Right.
Um, and so I found now working with small and mid-sized businesses that generally owners,
Yeah.
they truly believe it's so hard to be an entrepreneur. Like it is
Exactly.
not
Yeah.
easy. So people aren't doing it just to like, I mean, there are get rich quick
No, for
schemes, right?
sure.
But
Yeah.
like for the most part, most people who are starting a business aren't doing it because like they think they're going to have millions. Like they're doing it because they genuinely want to solve someone's problem. And
Right.
so most of the people that I work with, like they just think that their solution is a little bit better than someone else's
Yeah.
solution. And so I just want to help them like convey that because I think it's genuinely making the world a better place by
Yeah.
having them succeed.
And do you think it comes with size? So like for example, do you think for a smaller company it's easier to stick to that why and stick to the brand? And then as you grow, do you feel like it's a lot easier to kind of separate from that and look more towards the money once you start making, some really solid cash flow and things like that?
Yeah, totally. And I don't think that anyone does it intentionally. Like I think it's one of those things that just like slowly happens over time and you just don't even realize it. And of course, there are brands who have really stuck as best as they can to their core values. Like look at Patagonia. Obviously,
Yeah.
they've done a pretty good job considering there's still a lot of things they don't do great, but they've done a pretty good job.
Right.
But I do think that when you are much closer to the product, you can, or the service, you can see, you can like, you're actually interacting with your
Right.
client or consumer every single day. You can listen to their issues, their woes. When you're 5 levels like away, like you're not talking to the client. You have no idea.
Right. There's this huge chain that you have to get through before it gets to you. So it's kind of like a game of telephone at that point once you get too big.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like what's that process look like for you, for example? So if a brand comes to you, maybe they're kind of lost their why and you're trying to realign them and help them kind of convey this piece of authenticity. What do you do first?
Yeah. So that's why all of my design is grounded in strategy. And so we really want to start with that strategic piece. And so what I do is my like signature strategy course is essentially we're working one-on-one, and it's a lot of the corporate strategy that I've found, but then that authenticity piece is it's kind of a mix of finding your niche as well as figuring out like your unique voice. And so sometimes that's different than the founder. A lot of times it's quite similar to the founder because there's a reason why they founded it.
Yeah.
And so that's why in my strategy, it's heavily corporate strategy because that's my background, but I do infuse a lot of kind of personal development tools as well as just like kind of more entrepreneurship tools that are for smaller businesses. Because ultimately, what's getting in the way a lot of times are kind of these old habits or limiting beliefs that we have about like how we have to show up or how we should show up or fear of showing up. And so by infusing kind of that personal development piece included with the corporate strategy, I found that that's where you get the best results. And you can really tap into like who you are as a business at your core.
Right. That's a great way of doing it. It's very similar to somewhat what I do too. Because I mean, in the beginning, it's usually structured as like, what's your mission, your overarching, what's your goal overall, and then we go from there. But I really like that personal development piece. So like, and you were talking about like finding your niche and things like that. So how can somebody go and do that? And also, do you feel like it's kind of like a two-part question? So how can somebody find their niche? And do you feel like that it's better to have more of a small focused one or cast a wider net, or do you think it depends? What do you think?
No, I think it's a really great question. I think it depends. I think your niche can be a lot of different things. So like for example, for a designer or like a writer or someone who's more in the creative field, sometimes it makes sense for your niche to not be an industry, but to be more of like a tone or a style, right?
Right.
Like so if you tend to like more like chic, obscure or like lean design, like you can work with a magazine, you could work with any sort of industry,
Right.
and that's kind of your niche. I have found that, yeah, I think having a niche, it helps a lot because the beautiful thing is you're slowly removing your competition.
Yep.
Um, and you're yeah, once someone does find you, you're like, "Oh my god, they solved the exact
Exactly.
problem that I need." And so they're kinda like, "Well, I have to work with them," you
Right.
know?
Exactly. And do you feel like, because I know when you're finding your niche too, a big piece of that is conveying that niche in a way that resonates with people and like your target customers and things like that. So
Yes.
I know you're talking about the messaging aspect of things. So let's say somebody knows now, okay, this is what I want to focus on. Here's my target customer. How do you go into developing messaging that conveys what they want to convey?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it's kind of 2 parts. So one, it's finding your niche, which I recommend there's kind of 2 ways of doing that, or I think it's a two-parter. So
Mm,
one the first aspect is figuring out, like, what aspect of your business do you like? What aspect of relating and talking and working with your clients, what part lights you up the
right.
most? So that's one part. The other part that's just as important, if not more important, is looking at your competitive set and how you differentiate from them.
Yeah.
And so the question that I have found to be the most powerful, and it's a little juvenile, is to find like 3 to 5 competitors, people in your industry who are a direct competitor, and or people in your industry that you really look up to,
Mm.
and ask yourself, what do they do better than you? And what do you do better than them? And again, the
Right.
question is sort of juvenile, and it's not meant to like say
That's a
that
good
you're
way to put it. It's a good way
terrible.
to find your differentiator. What because that's really what you're supposed to lean into too at the end.
Yeah, like it's so simple, but it works really, really well.
Right.
And so after finding your niche, then you want to really ask yourself, like, how am I solving my aligned clients' problems? So a big part of my strategy piece, which is a big part of all corporate strategy, is really, really, really getting to know your current client, your dream client,
Right.
um, and if there's a delta between those two, why there's a delta between those two.
Yeah.
And so the more that you can be speaking to your clients' problems, and the earlier along you can speak to their problems. So if there's like a, if you think of someone who has a who's really cold in the winter,
Right.
right? And they just want to be warm in the winter. There's a zillion ways to solve that problem, right? You could sell them a space heater, you could sell them an electric jacket, which I just got and it works fantastically because
That's
I live
awesome. Yeah.
in this place in the world. Um,
That's cool though. The electric jacket. I'd be
yeah,
scared to wear that. Honestly, I don't know if I could do
highly recommend it if you
it.
live in a cold place. Um, there's so many things you can sell them. So you want to start early on in the journey and tell them like, "Oh, are you cold in the winter? This is the solution." Because the further along they get on that consumer journey, all of a sudden they're like, "Okay, I'm cold. I guess I need a jacket." And it's like,
Right.
"Oh,
Right.
that space heater just missed out because now they've decided that they need a jacket when really they could have been sold a space heater." So
That's,
it's
yeah.
finding the niche,
Yeah.
then speaking to people's problems early enough that they realize you're the solution.
Right. And I feel like a big part of that too is being consistently present. So, like for example, like let's say you're on social media or wherever you might be. I feel like showing up, but it's not like you have to be there every single day, but like showing up in somewhat of a consistent way does keep you top of mind because, like you're saying, eventually, if you're conveying your niche in a good way, um, by the time somebody's ready to buy, you're that person who's top of mind. You're the person who they're going to come to. So that's
100%.
a great point.
Yeah.
So how can you stand out in more of like a quote unquote authentic way? Like what does it look like to be inauthentic kind of idea?
Yeah. I mean, so I think a big part of it is finding your niche. And then the other part is finding your voice and like what it is that you want to say. And so the question that I really like to ask is like, what do you want to be known for? And
Yeah,
how do you want to be known? Because when you think about that, you realize like, oh, I want to be known as being kind, or I want to be known as being a go-getter. And like
right.
that really leads to how you want to speak, the the metaphors you use, like kind of getting down into that minutia. And usually and hopefully you don't have to think it through too much. Like it should be authentic.
Right.
So it's just
Yeah.
like what your brain tends to go to. Like if you're an outdoorsy person and that's kind of just like part of who you are, like your metaphor might be like a skiing metaphor or a hiking metaphor.
Right.
Like that's just like tends to be what you do. And I think the problem and the good thing about our world is that most people have grown up around so much advertising
Yeah.
their entire lives that especially the younger generations, they can spot inauthenticity like in a millisecond. Like they
Literally.
might
Yeah.
get some older crowds convinced, but no,
There's
the younger
there's
generation, absolutely not.
exactly. And there's like for example, there's this Bank of America ad that I'll never forget because it's literally a guy who set up a webcam with no microphone and it's just like the webcam mic and it's a terrible ad, like it sounds awful, but it's just a guy telling you to buy or to go to I forget what he was even telling me. But I just know it was from Bank of America and it was so bad that it was good. It was really authentic. It felt like somebody just put a camera down and did it, which really throws you off when you see all these other like super curated ads that are very corporate feeling and they don't really have that whole solid messaging, that clever messaging piece to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we can read right through it. And so when you're actually just like speaking from the heart, I would imagine this guy was I don't know, maybe he was a paid actor who was just really good, but like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
like,
But he was
like
really good. He did a
exactly.
great
And
job.
so like that, yeah, that resonates because people are just tired of seeing the kind of fakeness
Right.
of messaging. Yeah.
And I know that you also kind of going into like that merch shop piece. I thought that was super interesting that you had the centered creative merch. So was there kind of a reason behind doing that, and why did you go with that?
So that was more that I didn't feel like doing my work for that day. And so I decided it would be more fun to design sweatshirts, of
That's
which it
awesome.
was. It was very
Yeah.
fun and they're so comfortable. Um,
No, that's awesome. I saw that. I was like, that's so cool. I want to make my own hoodies. That's awesome.
yeah, sometimes you'd have to just like let yourself have a day of following the shiny object down the
Yeah,
rabbit hole.
makes
Yeah.
sense. Um, so like, yeah, so clearly you're very much into design and that whole aspect of things. So after you figure out the entire kind of corporate strategy and your niche and your voice, what does your design process look like, and how do you kind of apply all those insights?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I break it down like most designers do into colors and um, type, and then into the logo or website design and or
Mhm.
website design. I think for me, what the biggest benefit of doing the strategy is kind of twofold. One is that it's strategy. I get to really, really understand both the market that they're working in and their aligned client. And
Right.
so if I have to do more research to understand them more or understand kind of the tone and look and feel that tends to resonate, I can do that. Um, and then the other thing that is the most helpful, honestly, is I really get to know the person. So my
Mhm.
strategy, the strategy section takes it's 2 2-hour sessions
Mhm.
that we're working together with a bunch of pre-work that I make people do.
Yeah,
Um,
it
which
is
is
very similar thing. Totally get it. Yeah.
yeah. And so we're just talking about your brand. We're talking about what you like, showing me what you like. So I really get to know the brand owner during that process. And that can be the biggest part and the biggest struggle I see designers having is like if my client is saying, I want an authentic brand, and what authenticity visually means to me versus visually means to them
Yep.
is
Yep.
two different things. We have to
Exactly.
figure that out. And that's usually not something that I can't just be like, what is authenticity?
Right.
Authenticity really sound like
You have
um
to get there through kind of a certain, yeah, there's a whole process of getting to that point. You can't just kind of come up with it out of thin air for sure.
yeah, because most people don't know. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like a getting to know you process. I definitely live a little bit in the woo-woo space. And so I feel like I get to like just like intuitively connect with the other person as
Yeah.
well. And yeah, it
'Cause
it
I mean,
just
at the end, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, it helps with communication. That's all I wanted to
Right.
say.
Yeah, because I was gonna say at the end of the day, they are the people who are paying you to do it, right? So it's like their input, even if you have more experience and you can kind of show, and I feel like if you're a solid designer, you would try to prove why your design is better with some, how you got there, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, they are the person paying you, so you do have to find a middle ground, um,
Yes,
especially if you want them to come back and work with you again. Um, and that
exactly.
can take trial and error. I mean, for example, we've done things where we've made like a full logo and design system and everything. Um, and then we go present it and they don't like it. And then that was about a year ago. And I realized, okay, we can't go and do the whole design process in the dark and then come and present. Um,
Mhm.
so something that we've done, and I don't know if maybe you do something similar, where kind of we have sketches, we have a few different versions, and then I sit and have a meeting and it's like, okay, which one of these is resonating? Which direction should we go? Do you do anything similar to that?
Yeah, so I break it down into first we do the colors and I make 2 or 3 different color options,
Mhm.
and then type and we do 4 different type options, and then I do 2 or 3 different logo, like, yeah, they're
Yeah, yeah.
rough, but
Yeah,
they're,
exactly.
like, close to being fine, they're, like
Yeah,
they might not have the exact date and things like that
yeah,
on them,
exactly.
but they
Yeah,
look really good.
yeah.
And then do 3 of those, 2 or 3 of those, depending on the client, and then from there, we're able to be like, okay, I like these elements. I don't like those elements. So luckily, when you really break it down, that helps. Yeah. kind
Yeah.
of stop that process from getting too unwieldy, because I had the same exact things happen. We just like were talking past each other. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
exactly.
Where
Yeah.
like, you're just like not communicating. And so
Yeah.
it took me a while to figure out a strategy that like leaves us both feeling really good in
Right.
the end. Because working with designers, it's really hard because
Yeah.
not most people aren't visual people
Right.
in the way that like designers, you and I are. And
Mhm.
so in order to like speak to visuals, they're like, I don't know, I kind of like, I think I want it like
Exactly.
this.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, now we have to like put words to those visuals. And that
Right.
can
Yeah.
sometimes be so hard.
Exactly. And do you feel like I know like certain industries, for example, really rely on visuals. And in my mind, I mean, I've never worked with wineries or breweries or anything similar, but I feel like the average winery client is looking at the visuals a lot more than the strategy side. Would I be wrong in saying that, or how do you
Oh,
look at it?
no. And I think that's kind of true though I mean, ultimately a lot of marketing is like, if you have my product, you will be happier than you
Right.
are now.
Yeah.
And that is particularly with wine, which is I love wine. I'm
Yeah.
a huge wine nerd, but ultimately wine is not good for you. And so I don't love
That's true.
marketing something that is actually harmful for you,
Right.
saying that it will make you happier. It might be fun and
Yeah.
it might be in a beautiful location, but it's not actually good for you.
Right.
And so I try to market things that are actually good for you.
Makes sense.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you want to show people are having, a good time,
Mhm.
regardless of what your product is, or they're getting the solution that they wanted, right?
Right. Yeah. Because I'm only coming from the kind of the perspective of like when I kind of started doing all the design side of things. Besides the strategy piece, I'd have people come to us and just immediately start talking about the design aspect and like we want our packaging to look like this. We love this company's packaging and blah 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 blah. But there would be no aspect before that talking about okay, well, how do we even get here? What's our goal? Where are we trying to get to? Um, which I think is a huge influence. So I wasn't sure if that kind of
Oh,
carried over.
oh no, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
it I think most of my clients come in like that. They're like, okay, I want it to look like this and I want pink. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I love pink. Let's go. Like, but like also I'm gonna have you take like 7 steps back before. And
Yeah.
usually once you've walked through the strategy piece, like, they're also incredibly intelligent. So like
Right.
they get it. Like we're following along the same
Yeah.
thing. We're speaking together and we're coming to the conclusions together instead of me just being like, this is right, you're wrong. Like we're
Yeah, yeah, it's less mind reading
yeah,
throughout the whole
yeah.
thing, absolutely. So, I mean, now we're kind of in the new year and everything like that, so what are your plans going into this year for your agency, for anything else you're looking to do? What's going on?
Yeah. So I'm a couple things. One is I'm trying to just like simplify my life and just focus and keep
Right.
it streamlined. Last year I did a lot of traveling. So I'm trying to keep it as simple and streamlined as possible. I'm getting married at the end of the year.
Oh,
So
congrats.
a lot of things happening. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
I'm also launching a Kickstarter in like 4 to 6 months for a consumer electronic,
Oh,
which I'm really excited about. So that'll be my first venture in creating like, yeah, consumer electronic. I've
that's
created
awesome.
wine bottles and wine labels and things like that before as a physical product. But now working in brand design, you see the brand on a sign, or
Yeah,
I did a
yeah,
yoga studio down the street from me. So I get to see that all the time, but it'll be cool to actually see. I'm venturing into like creating physical products and seeing
right.
how that goes, trying something new.
How's that process been for you? Because I mean, now you have this background of like, you've helped develop a strategy piece, a design piece, and I know a lot of the time when you were doing it for yourself, at least for me, in the beginning, I was completely ignoring everything I was doing for other people, and I would just kind of jump right in. So, have you been doing a similar thing?
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly the same thing. Yeah. It is so bad. It is so hard to take your own advice. Like
Yeah.
it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I am now to the point where I designed like a whole logo and things,
Right.
and I need to just like scrap it and actually do my own process with me.
I'm
The
in the
problem
same
is,
boat.
it's hard to do it with yourself. Like I
Right.
need like I
A
need I need
facilitator
to double
there.
myself and so that I
Yeah.
can talk with
Exactly.
her.
Oh, right. And that makes so much sense. And I mean, the reason I bring it up is because I spent, like, for example, a year or two starting this and completely ignoring my own advice. And then maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I sat down, I said, okay, let me do my own workshop. Let me just sit and do it. So I went through the whole thing, and then I was like, oh, okay, I see everything I should be cutting out. I see where I should be going. So it was just, yeah. So I just want to see if you're in the same boat.
No, I'm glad to hear that it worked. Yeah, so
Yeah, yeah, definitely did.
I need to do that part. I have been worrying about like the other kind of nitty-gritty finance and making sure the product works and things like that. But
Right.
I'm excited to get to that part, but I'm also like just nervous because I think I put much more pressure on it because it is what
Okay.
I do, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. So I mean, have you had any kind of big projects this year that you feel like you kind of took away a big lesson from? Is there anything that any company that you worked with and you walked away and you were like, okay, let me not do that again, or let me, any big lesson that you had?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's been a couple of things. I think one is timelines. I am from right outside Manhattan. Like I am used to like go, go, go. I feel
Yep.
like I
Yep.
softened up a bit because I was in California for about 7 years, but now
That'll
I
do.
live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so it's really funny to have the clients that I have that are in like New York or California tend to be like, okay, we have to finish. Like, what's your timeline on this? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Lovely, lovely Wyoming clients. Take my offer. I'm like, "Oh, like,
That's
I
great.
hired you, like, 6 months ago."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm still waiting for, like, this, and this from you.
Right.
Like, I actually can't do this until I can, like, log into your Squarespace account." Um,
Exactly.
and so I'm learning how to, like, keep calendars going. That's
Mm.
been definitely a big one because I can't be working all day or, like, all
Right.
year on
Yeah.
a
No.
website.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so
No, I
that's
totally get that.
as part of just like the nuances of running a business.
Right. Yeah, and something that I've been doing too is kind of like this whole call schedule thing, because I started, this series and then client calls and things like that. Somebody gave me the recommendation of setting up different days, like theme your days. So this is my
Yeah.
client call day, this is my like creator call day, and that's worked really, really well. Is there anything similar? Because I'm trying to like also make myself a little bit more efficient coming into this year. So is there anything that you have been doing that you feel like is a solid tip?
No, not really. I mean,
Yeah.
I've tried to I've tried to once like make as much in the homework, like before we even have our first call, like
Right.
you've signed on, all that kind of stuff. Put as much of what I need from you in like the pre-work. Like we cannot have our first call
Right.
until
Right.
you've done these things.
Yeah.
And that usually helps a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's helped. And then honestly, I've tried to just be like, let it go a little bit and know that
Right.
like I'm working as much, like getting everything
Right.
done
Right.
in the time that I do and
Yeah.
just like kind of trusting divine timing, if I
Yeah.
can say that, and
Yeah.
just being like, you know what, if this particular website is going to take a really, really long time, like maybe that's for the best because like I am really busy with these other clients right now. And
Right.
like maybe the end of January will end up being a little slower, or like, like whatever it
Right.
is, like
Yeah.
have a slow week when
Yeah.
they do finally get me X, Y, and Z. And so I'm
Makes sense.
trying to just like also appreciate it for what it is that like maybe it is for the best.
Right.
But that's not a productivity hack.
No, but I see what you're saying. Yeah. And I mean, even that kind of like before that pre-worksheet thing, because I have that, but it's like 4 questions, so I could definitely make it better. What kind of stuff are you
Mhm.
looking for before that first call?
Ooh, I asked for so much stuff.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I
Um,
believe you.
so yeah, like all about their business, why they started their business, behind their name, like all the stuff, who they think that their aligned client is, like who their current client is, all that kind of stuff. What else? So it was like a lot of questions about their business. I'm also happy to send you what I sent.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then I have them do 4 Pinterest boards.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
one is colors, shapes, and textures of their brand. One is their brand personification. So if their brand was a person, who
That's
would
a
their
really good idea.
be?
Wow.
I love
Right.
that one.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's logo inspiration, and then typography inspiration.
Okay.
So it's like definitely putting. Sometimes I was worried when I first started asking that, like people were thinking like I was making them design the logo
Right.
before,
It's
but
yeah.
honestly, usually people are not very good at like finding like there's a reason why they're high. Like there's a reason why like I know every single font. It feels like that
Right. Yeah.
exists to mankind right now.
Yeah.
And so they like give you kind of a general gist and then you really take it to like the nth level.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
a great idea. The Pinterest board is such a cool way of doing it because it's like give them like the most freedom possible to just go find stuff that resonates. Because I've done, for example, like if I do a workshop, I'll do like what actor or like mix of actors would
Ooh.
have your brand represent? And I usually get some really cool answers. Like people will mix up all these different actors that you feel like are unrelated, but when you see them mixed up, it's like, oh, okay, I can see that actually. Yeah. So it does help stuff like that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
try to
no,
help people.
I love that. I love that.
Um, but yeah, do you think there's anything about, especially kind of with wineries and who you work with, do you think there's anything that most people don't understand about brand strategy and design?
That's a good question. I think I found that a fair amount of people don't understand the benefit of starting with brand strategy. Like they're like, I just need to look like good or
Right,
better,
right,
or I just need to look the way that I think that I need to look,
right. Yeah,
which, is always tricky. But I try to sort of guide, and this is again why the brand strategy session is so long.
right.
But I try to like subtly guide of like, okay, who is your aligned client? And oh, I guess the biggest thing is them thinking, yeah, every single person that I work with, and I just find it funny because I've done this myself. Like
Yeah,
everyone does it, but I'm just shocked every time. Even people that I've worked with who work in branding, because I've worked with like some of my old coworkers, they think that they are the target audience. And
that's
so
usually a problem for sure. Yeah.
you aren't the
Yeah,
target audience because
never are.
look, you are an expert in what you're doing, which
Yeah,
generally you are. If you're offering a service,
yeah,
I hope that you are the expert. If you're creating a product, you're usually creating it to, to fit a need that you have or something that you have. So you are, so much more than the people that you're selling to. So you
yeah,
are not the ideal client. You might be similar to them. You might have like some aspects to them that are similar,
right.
but you are not the ideal client. And so separating that and creating like your dream client avatar or your current
Mhm.
client avatar is so vital so that you're actually solving people's problem and you're actually speaking to their real emotional needs instead of just like or creating something that actually attracts them instead of
Yeah,
just being like, well, my favorite color is hot pink. So
yeah,
can we make it hot pink?
yep,
And I'm
yep,
like, look, I can make whatever color you want, but like if you want this to actually sell, I would not recommend hot pink for X, Y, and Z reasons because we discussed it and figured that out through
right,
all these questions that we answered. Um,
exactly. Yeah, and
yeah.
that's a great way to put it because and something you can even do too if you have the time or let's say you know certain people who've bought from you, you can go interview your customers one-on-one too. So if you have kind of that persona and you go talk to them, I mean, you don't have to talk to tons and tons of people, but talk to 5, 10 people, and see what they have to say before you go all in on your brand and before you go all in on your messaging. See if it aligns with those people that you're actually trying to reach. I think it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah. The more you can know your client, like the better your product's going to be every time. And like your client doesn't always know best, which is why you need to like get to know them and think strategically at the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
But they know a lot.
yeah,
They can be really helpful. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so, sorry, I just had a question I lost. Oh yeah, so what do you think it looks like to be too authentic? So can you be too authentic as a brand? Because that's something I've been thinking about. Even I want to change up my messaging a little bit and how I present myself online. Um,
Yeah.
but what do you think too far looks like?
Too far.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on the brand and who you are and the boundaries that you want to have, right? Like I think I saw a post on LinkedIn a few like last month or something and it was a woman in a bikini and she
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, like I, never was going to post a photo of me in a bikini, but like this is actually part of one of the workshops I do at this retreat that I offer.
Mhm.
Where like, I don't know, we like write on our bodies. Like, I don't know exactly
Yeah.
what she does, but
Yeah.
it is genuinely part of what she does. And like
Okay.
also she looked great in a bikini, but like you like that for
I see.
her was
Yeah.
authentic. And like,
Yeah.
sure, I probably will never post a photo of myself in a bikini on
Yeah.
LinkedIn,
Yeah.
or even on Instagram on my like on the Centered Creative
Sure. Right.
Instagram. But like that made sense. So I think that like when there is a good kind of reason and it is truly coming from like a place of heart, it makes sense. I
Right.
think I
Do you
don't
think
know. I would love for you to actually answer this. Like, I feel like, you know, the selfie movement on LinkedIn
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
helps you get more like reach and stuff like that. I feel like some of them are kind of like cute and fun, and you're like getting to like see what the person really
Yeah.
looks like instead of this like perfectly posed like LinkedIn post. And then
Right.
some of them are like, I'm like, why are you posting this photo of yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can see between those two, and like they're
Exactly.
usually the photo themselves are not that different. It's
Right.
like it is the energy behind it, and
Yeah.
so
It's also context. Context was huge too, like you were saying earlier, because it's like if you're posting a selfie and then talking about something completely unrelated to this picture, it's just gonna turn somebody off once they start actually reading your content.
mhm,
And I feel like there's like this small subconscious piece of like you're breaking promises. I know that's like a big thing to put into these things, but like I've been thinking about it as I scroll through LinkedIn, right? And it's like you see some of these things, and some of them are like really great hooks. And you click read more, and it's like the most very generic solution, and it's not actually coming from somebody's themselves. You know what I mean? And it feels like you've been copying it. So I think things like that really mess with the whole authenticity piece.
mhm.
So if you have a promise, then be able to deliver on that promise. I feel like is huge.
Yeah, I think that is so, so, so important. Like, you see, I feel like a lot too, like, I read a post this morning, which is why I'm thinking of it. It was like, like, asked a question, it was like, "Are you ready to know the answer?" Like,
Right.
"Really? Are you" like,
Yeah.
it's like face to face,
Yeah.
"Really?" And then it was like,
Exactly.
yeah, like a generic
Yeah.
answer to the question, and you're like, "Okay, dude, I've read this
Yeah. Like you
version."
got me to the end, but it's like, what do I do now? Like now that I'm at the end, it feels like you know very generic, like you're saying.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
whole point of marketing, right, is to build trust and to build a relationship with your consumer so that they wanna open their wallet and give it to you, right?
Right. Right.
And so when you, yeah, have a great hook, but that doesn't lead you to somewhere that, like, you're not getting delivered to,
Yeah.
that loses that trust, and so it's all about, yeah, creating
Yeah.
and maintaining that trust.
And do you think now that we're kind of going into like 2023 and like everybody, the personal brand takeover is kind of happening where everybody's on LinkedIn and things like that. Do you think it's important for founders to be present in their brand? And what I mean by that is, do you think it's important for them to not stand behind a logo in terms of their entire brand strategy and their messaging? Um, should we know about the founder as consumers?
I don't know. I think it depends. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, big companies like Tesla and Amazon and things like that, like there is no not knowing the founders, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
you
Yeah.
cannot get away with it not knowing. I think it's up to the founder. Do I think if you have an engaged community, your business will do better? Yes. Do I
Yeah.
think it's absolutely necessary in order to have a successful business? No. So
Yeah.
I think it's up to the founder and what they want. But yeah, I mean, you see this massive growth of like ghostwriters for
Right.
LinkedIn
Yeah.
for founders because, of course, they don't have time
No.
to write
Yeah.
in every day and like have
Exactly.
something authentic. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of time to do that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, so yeah, I think it just depends like on what you're going for. I think if like you're trying to go for being a super, authentic, transparent brand, it couldn't hurt, but you see people doing it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree, 100%. So I think we're reaching kind of like the end time, but if there are any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. But in the meantime, if you want to promote anything or kind of end off with a quote or anything like that, feel free.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any quotes. I hope everyone has a really lovely Friday and relaxing weekend. And if you're looking for me, I am Emily Regan Byrne on LinkedIn, Centered Creative on Instagram, and then centeredcreativestudio.com. So
Awesome.
you can reach me there. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was
Yeah.
great.
Thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined in. I'll see you guys all next week.